So I'm excited to introduce Dr. Cathy Moak, our speaker today. I've had the opportunity and the honor to work with Dr. Moak for the past 2 to 3 years, I guess, as we've been a partner with them in their UT Austin Gear Up grant. So UT Austin Gear Up serves over 10,000 kids in Central and South Texas. As an ETC, I've got to work with her on supporting that grant, supporting the initiatives of that grant. And we're excited to hear from Dr. Moak today on navigating equity and access for higher education. So Dr. Moak, can you hear me?
There we go.
Excellent.
Yay, you can hear me. Sorry, everybody. It's crazy.
That's okay.
Technology.
I know, that's right. Thank you for working through it.
Also, 2021.
That's right.
We're already here.
That's right. Okay, so I switched over and you are presenter now.
Outstanding. So, hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I just kind of wanted to start by really giving a caveat to what I'm talking about, which is this project I'm going to talk about was not me. I was just blessed to be a part of it and got to watch some amazing people. So I want to make sure the credit goes to those in the districts that really did the work. So I wanted to start with that, but I kind of want to tell you about what's happened. So I'm part of a grant that we manage at UT Austin called Gear Up, and you may have heard of that. You may be a part of a Gear Up grant. Gear Up stands for Gaining Early Awareness and Readiness for Undergraduate Programs. So in a nutshell, the plan from Gear Up is to get kids to college. We do everything we can to make sure that kids have post-secondary opportunities. And the students that we work with are primarily students that are low income. We have a really diverse population. And so we are trying to make sure those kids have opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise. So that's kind of Gear Up in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it than that. But if you understand that, you're going to understand kind of what we did, the genesis of what we did. So we figured out, and we've read and we've studied, and part of the Gear Up grant goals is to have Algebra 1 early for our students, because Algebra 1 is the gatekeeper to college. We know that through a lot of the literature and the research that's been done through the Department of Ed. And we also know that in Texas that it is particularly true. And we have a partner in our grant, the E3 Alliance, and they've done a lot of research on Algebra 1 in 8th grade or algebra and just math courses in general, and how it impacts student enrollment in college and student success, and who really is not able to participate in it. So I wanted to share with you a little bit of their data, but I really want you to go read their study. And so I have a link at the end of the presentation that I want you to follow to go read what they've done, because it's really their work. I'm just going to kind of share what we found from it. So one of the things we found is the greatest disparity is between low income and non-low income students. And so when we talk about, and I'm going to show you in a minute, the probability of a student matriculating in higher education versus not, the greatest predictor is their math, the math that they've taken. So we looked at the highest math they took in high school. I'd say E3 looked at the highest math they passed in high school to see what was a comparison between low income and non-low income. And what they found was that 36% of students in low income took pre-calculus in an AP math class, and that could be calculus or statistics, some AP math class that yielded credit. The non-low income students had 56%. So there's a 20% difference between low income and non-low income. And that's very telling from what we see, which is there are not a lot of students in our districts that were really taking these courses. And we really want to get these kids to college. So when you look at higher education enrollment rates, so what is the predictor that a student will go to college? So if their highest math is Algebra 2, it's 55%. If it's pre-cal, it's 71%. And if they're AP math, it's 78%. So we want our kids to go to college, and we want them to have those advanced math courses. But if we want that to happen, we have to start way back in middle school to make sure they're on a sequence to be able to get to that. So one of the Gear Up goals was to make sure that students had Algebra 1 early. And so that was kind of written into it. And they wanted 30% of Algebra 1 by grade 8 and 85% by grade 9. And when we look at Texas, and I know some of you are not from Texas, but all of our districts are in Texas, so we kind of looked at that data. 27% were taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade. And it's actually, that's mostly in urban schools and suburban schools. The non-low income students is 41%, and the low income students is 19%. So very disparate between incomes on who gets to take Algebra 1. So keeping those grant goals in mind and thinking about those things, we also wanted to look at low income, non-low income by race. And when we look at the disparities there, it really is gut-wrenching when we see that Black low-income students are 14% are taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade. And we know it's the single greatest predictor of whether or not they're going to go to college. Hispanic is 19%. White low-income is 17%. And so income was probably the greatest predictor, but race is also a big predictor there. And there are a lot of reasons why that might happen, and none of them are good. So we knew that we had to do better. We also have some rural districts in our Gear Up grant. And when we look at that data, 15% of those kids are getting to take Algebra 1. So we knew there was a problem. Our districts knew there was a problem. But I have to go way back to about 2012, where one of our districts took this risk before anyone else. I love this quote, which is, "It's quite a scary path to walk on when you have no one's past experience to lean on or learn from. It's all new and uncharted, but nothing is finished unless it is started." And this district, Somerset ISD, took the risk first, and their outcomes were amazing. So when we go back to 2012, where they were at about a little more than 30% in 2012 and 2013, they had 97% passing the end of course exam that we have in Texas. Many of you have something similar, but just think about your accountability measure. So they were at 97%, 98%, which, by the way, is very common for Algebra 1 because we have so few students taking it. They are picking the students they know will be successful. And so in Texas, we have many, many school districts that have 100% pass Algebra 1, and they think that's great. But what that tells me is that not enough kids are taking Algebra 1. if you have 100% pass. Somebody's lost an opportunity. So we get into the spring of 2014. They bumped it up. They had 93% pass. And in the spring of 2015, they had all of their students taking Algebra 1 and 87% pass the end of course exam. So we know it can be done. We know that every kid can do it. And when I say every kid, I mean special ed kids, English language learners. Every kid is taking Algebra 1. So they kind of started it, Somerset did, and it was very successful. So we brought together a group. So we had one district that called us and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this Algebra 1. Can you help us? And by that, they mean, do you have resources at Gear Up that could help? And we knew this was something that would have a powerful impact on our students. So we kind of asked around and said, hey, would anyone else be interested in trying this Algebra 1 for all? So we brought together what we called the Algebra 1 think tank. And it was just districts. It was really organic. And so these districts came together and they said, okay, what's it going to take? So we brought in Somerset because we knew they had done it. And these other districts were looking at it and considering it. Edgewood had kind of already started planning. Southwest had already started implementing pieces of it. East Central was ready to go, and San Marcos was interested in considering it. And they talked through what they thought might be our biggest obstacles in that first think tank if we did this. What would happen? What do we need to do to prepare if we are actually going to try to do this with our kids? And here were the things that they thought were going to be the biggest obstacles to overcome. So one is teacher readiness, and that makes sense. We may not have the teachers to teach that. And in Texas, you can teach 8th grade math and not have a secondary teaching certificate, and that was common. So you couldn't teach Algebra 1 because Algebra 1 is considered a high school course. You would have to have a teaching certificate for that. The other one is student readiness. Our students haven't had the pre-algebra that they may need to be able to start in an algebra class. And then parent communication, a lot of times that's a big struggle, and so we wanted to make sure we addressed that, and we knew we would need partner support. So for the teacher preparation, we had one district who really, Edgewood, they looked at it and said, we need to get the teachers that buy in and certify them, and not necessarily pull in certified teachers that don't buy in. So we took the teachers that were middle school teachers that bought into this idea, and they sent them through a course, did it themselves, and had them challenge the certification test in Texas to make them certified teachers to be able to teach Algebra 1. Then TI was so gracious. We brought them to that first think tank meeting and said, hey, we need some help. And what came out of that was a conference for all of these teachers to learn how to use the Nspire calculator. So TI put it together. We had teachers from all of our districts, every campus come and learn how to use the Nspire. We called it the Nspire Conference, and we had it there in Austin. And our teachers came to learn how to use those calculators because that was going to be a very necessary component in the success of our students. So to get our students ready, we had to figure out where the gaps were. So we looked at the curriculum to say, okay, here's where we need to fill in the gaps to make sure they have all the pre-algebra that they need to be able to be successful. And we put together boot camps, which we did in May after our accountability testing. So those last 3 weeks where not much is done often, we had boot camps and we caught those kids up. And then we also had summer bridge programs. So we did, and I'll talk more about that with our partners, but we did a Step Up to Algebra program to get them ready for when they started algebra. So that's prep for students and teachers, but we knew we had to have partners. TI was an amazing partner for us. So they helped us build some of the bridge curriculum. We actually aligned our standards with the curriculum that they had already built and put it together for a bridge curriculum for our districts. And TI brought in people to help us do that. And we got calculators. We wanted to make sure that every kid in Algebra 1 had a calculator, an Nspire calculator, on the day they tested. Because if we wanted them to have the advantage that comes with the Nspire calculator, they had to have it in their hands when we tested, and they had to understand it. And so we spread those calculators out across the campus and made sure it was almost a one-to-one. So when you look at that 10,000 number, that's almost, it's pretty close to the number of kids we had in the cohort. But it definitely addressed most of the kids that were doing Algebra 1 for all. So we also worked with the Agile Mind, and they helped us build those summer bridge programs. So they work with the Dana Center at UT Austin and put together curriculum for us, bundled it for us for Algebra 1, Step Up to Algebra, for TSI. So if you're not familiar with TSI is like AccuPlacer in your districts. So that's the college readiness exam in Texas that our students have to take to be deemed college ready. So they took, we made sure that our students had TSI. We're trying to get them to take that early so they can start taking dual credit courses. So Agile Mind helped us with that and bundled together a TSI program and the summer algebra program, and have been working on a Step Up to Geometry and to Algebra 2 to make sure we have those summer programs, which have been one of the most important elements in the success of these students. So we also worked with Princeton, and Princeton has a homework helper called Tutor.com, and you may be familiar with it, and it has been an important element in the success of our students, because when they need help with that algebra, they can go online. And it has been really important in the middle of a pandemic that they can go get that help they need through Tutor.com. So let's talk about the results. So as you can imagine, this was scary. It was a risk. And the districts that did this knew that it would be a risk. But it was shocking to see how it all worked out. So in the beginning, in the fall, when they did their first benchmarks, we all kind of panicked and thought, oh no. But by spring, we started to see good things happening. And by the end, 80% of those students, and when I say all, I mean all, special ed, English language learners, every kind of sub-pop you can imagine, 80% of them passed the end of course exam for the state of Texas. That number, 80%, is actually higher, and I'll talk some more about this in a minute, than they've done in the 7th grade. They didn't have 80% pass their 7th grade accountability test. So now we have 72% more students who have an Algebra 1 credit compared to last year's 8th graders. It was amazing. We have 0 campuses that went down in their accountability from 7th grade to Algebra 1, so that same cohort of students, and from last year's 8th grade students who didn't take Algebra 1 compared to our students who did take Algebra 1. No one went down a single percent in our end of course testing in all of those districts. So the results were, there's nothing to lose. That's what we found. So 19% more students pass. So it says approaches in Texas, that's the word they use for pass, the Algebra 1 EOC than the 7th grade STAR math test. So if we use that as a predictor, their 7th grade, they were 19% higher than what we would have predicted. It was amazing. And then we had 50% achieved meets and 26% masters. If you're not in Texas, that may not mean anything to you, but it's a big deal here because we want our students to not just pass, but to do well. So in the end, we had 1,440 students who were 3 times more likely to meet their ACT benchmarks, who have achieved the single greatest predictor of college enrollment, and who now have access to those AP courses like calculus and statistics, who would not otherwise have that as an option. So those risks that they took were amazing, and they paid off well. And I will tell you that it's not an easy thing to do. It took a lot of work, but the outcome was life-changing for these 1,400 students. I love this quote, which is, "The best math we can learn is how to calculate the future costs of our current decisions." So if you're thinking about this, I hope you will consider the impact on the students and how their lives could change, how they can now have a STEM major, they can now take calculus, all those things. So I have a link here at the bottom. It's http:// you know, you always have to put that in. And then it's tx.ag/A1FA for Algebra 1 for all. And that's a page on our website that has a literature review. So if you want to go through and read the literature, it has our results. It has the E3 report that I shared with you earlier. So you can go find all kinds of resources there. All right, here's my contact information. So grab this information and feel free to reach out. You can call me or text me or email me, and I'll be happy to talk you through the things that happened in our districts and maybe even connect you. We've had some people who've reached out where we just take them into these classrooms so they can see that it's done and how it's done. Of course, right now in a pandemic, that's not an option, but we can help you see how this is done and how you could be successful too. All right, Priza, I think we're ready for questions and answers. Maybe questions.
Thank you, Cathy. I appreciate that. So our first question is from a participant that has to actually leave early, so we're going to take his question first. And the question is, what options were available to students who did not pass algebra in grade 8?
That's a great question. So we really spent a lot of time considering that. Of course, we're going to offer Algebra 1 in high school for them, but we looked at some options for that. And so we worked with the STEM Center at UT, which is now in a different section, but we looked at bootstrap algebra. So you can actually get an Algebra 1 credit and a computer science credit by taking bootstrap algebra in Texas. And so we wanted to make sure they didn't lose credits while they caught up. And so we encouraged people to put them in those, in that course. And that curriculum is free if you go to the professional development. It's amazing. And we had several people who took us up on that as an option. So you definitely have to have, you want to make sure they get that credit if they don't pass. But what you'll see and what happened with Somerset is that the students were passing in the summer, that they had 50 more pass, I believe it was 50, by the end of the summer, of the ones who didn't fail, and it ended up being maybe just a handful that would have to take it in high school. So you want to make sure you offer those summer courses so they're really successful. When they get to high school, you can almost fix the problem by the time they get to high school and they still have the credit. Good question.
Thank you. So anybody else that has questions, feel free to put them in the chat window. It's not going to show up to everybody. It'll just show up to us panelists, and then I'll ask them as they come up. Cathy, will you talk about what you did being a former middle school math teacher? I didn't have a secondary certification, so I wasn't able to teach Algebra 1 at the 8th grade level, even though I taught 8th grade students. So will you talk about that process and what it kind of took for those teachers? Did it take some motivation? Did it take stipends? Like, what did it take to kind of get them on board and get them prepared?
So basically, the teachers that participate are the ones that bought in. And they had to go through an intensive 2-week math course. But they were well prepared because they had been teaching 8th grade math for a time and were ready for that. And they just needed a growth mindset. You know, they needed to be able to know that they could pass this certification exam. So yes, stipends were a part of that. That came from the districts, so the districts would get them qualified, and the districts held the 2-week course. Now, the other thing that had to happen, because we had to think about the back end, Parisa, was that we needed people to be able to teach calculus. We needed people to be able to teach dual credit classes and AP classes, because in most of our districts, we just had 1 or 2 calculus classes. It was a very low number. So we had to offer options for them. So one of the things we did was we had a master's program. So teachers could, during the time our students were from 8th grade as they were going into high school, we offered a master's program for them to be able to get their master's and be qualified to teach those AP classes. Sorry, I didn't have my video on.
That's so smart that you guys thought about the beginning part, but also the whole point of this, right? To get the kids to expose them to pre-calc and calc, so and those upper level courses. So coming from this middle school perspective also, and having taught 7th grade, I might have thought as a 7th grade teacher, wait a second, what's this going to do? Are you pushing all the 8th grade teaks down to me, or how does this look? So will you talk about just that whole curriculum planning process, and what did that take for that vertical alignment to make that happen?
That's a great question too. So when we started, there was no preparation, which most people would be like, well, it would take 2 or 3 years to get them pre-algebra to get ready for Algebra 1. And I think the evidence that that's not true is in the results. And I always say this, I say, you don't take pre-Spanish, you just take Spanish. And we do the same thing with algebra. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't help if they have proportional reasoning and that they understand the algebraic concepts, but you can do it without it. But those districts that have done it are now backing down that curriculum. So they're making sure in 7th grade they get those 8th grade standards that they wouldn't get otherwise. Because what we figured out is after Algebra 1 and they go into geometry, they're missing some important pieces, like the Pythagorean theorem. We need them to have these pieces before they get to geometry. So you can back it down, and a lot of our districts are doing 7th and 8th grade together and moving some of the 7th grade down to 6th grade. And one of our districts I know is going all the way to 5th grade and revising that curriculum all the way up. So in Texas, we have to deal with the issue of testing, standardized testing. Most of you do. So we want to make sure we get those elements in, but we're also building in the other things. And we are finding that last 3 weeks, that boot camp that we have can be very successful.
Are students needing to take any summer courses between 7th and 8th grade to prepare them for this?
So some of them do. We have the bridge curriculum.
Okay.
So, yeah, we're doing summer bridge. It's anywhere from a couple of days to a couple of weeks. We find what works best is a couple of weeks, and they spend the whole day just doing SEL stuff and algebra stuff because they have to have this growth mindset, this belief that they can do this. And part of moving them into Algebra 1, and I really think a function of the success of Algebra 1 was the high expectations. That telling a kid they can do Algebra 1, where it was previously not offered to them, has its own reward. And we saw that.
Okay, great. So another question coming in is somebody wants a link to the Bootstraps program, so I'll try to find that. Is that on the We Teach CS?
It probably is on the We Teach CS.
Okay.
Who, by the way, Carol will be speaking at TI Talks in February, so you guys don't want to miss that because right. Carol Fletcher will tell you all about Bootstrap. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to chat about that a little bit at the end, but I'll try to put that link in the window for people that had questions. So another question that came in, Cathy, is, are there plans to follow the students as they enroll in AP classes in order to see if the pass rates for those students met or exceeded the total pool of students?
Yes. So in Europe, we track everything. So we're constantly watching. We have data that we capture on these students all the way down to grades and attendance and all those pieces. So we will know how successful they are in those AP classes, and we'll be tracking who attends those AP classes. And we're going to look at matriculation. Are they enrolling in higher education? We're even going to follow them into their first year of college. So we hope we'll know how well they did in those college math classes. So yeah, we're going to track them all the way through. We're tracking them now. We feel like there may be a little bit of an impact from this pandemic. And we don't, necessarily know how to measure that yet, but we're hoping that some of our summer programs will really catch them up, and I would encourage you to use summer programs to catch them up. But I also don't want to discourage you from trying this. Don't let the pandemic keep you from doing a really important thing for our kids. So
that was one of the questions that came up, was how do we even think about starting this during the pandemic and during a year like this? But I like what you're mentioning about that don't let this prevent you from doing this or trying this.
Right. We're learning we can catch kids up quickly to get them into these algebra courses. And again, it's like pre-Spanish. We're learning developmentally they are ready in 8th grade to take Algebra 1. We know they can, even without the preparation. They can do it. So we just do summer programs and boot camps.
Okay. What about the parent buy-in, Cathy? Was there any type of preparation or communication that needed to go out to parents to inform them why you were doing this and what it would mean for their students long term?
Yes, a lot, because parents, it's amazing, we would hear things like, well, my kid doesn't need to take algebra in 8th grade. Why would my kid need to take algebra in 8th grade? And so communicating that to them was really important. So there were parent nights where parents could come and talk about it. There was a lot of communication, both English and Spanish, because we have a lot of English learners in our communities. And so we really had to communicate that in both languages and just what the overall impact would be down the road, how important it was going to be for their kid to have this class in their future to open up opportunities. So we wanted to make sure they had that.
That understanding. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me go through these questions here a little bit more. How did you address the argument of high school accountability being reduced due to only having the lowest algebra students take an EOC on campus? And I've heard this from curriculum coordinators before, that as far as their accountability ratings go, it makes more sense for them to have every kid take 8th grade and nobody take algebra in middle school, so that all those 8th grade kids pass, and then they have those top level students like you talked about that normally pass Algebra 1 in middle school passing in high school. So how did that?
Well, it was a real problem, but it's an adult problem. It's not a kid problem, right? Any decision made in that regard would be to help accountability and not to help kids. And you have to come into the mindset of what's best for the kids, not what's best for the school. Now, there are things you can do, right? In Texas, you can choose other tests to take. So they could take Algebra 2 or other, there are a lot of other options you have. Or you could just make sure you really catch those kids up in the summer and do the best you can. And that's what Somerset was finding, that they were catching them up in the summer and that it really didn't impact them in that regard. And that's the best way to approach it. And I hear that question a lot, and it's a legitimate question because administrators have to care about accountability. But once you make that leap, that the opportunities for these kids is more important than that accountability, that's when all the dominoes start to fall. And you're able to build a program where kids have more confidence in math, and their self-efficacy in math is an important predictor in how well they do. And by simply just putting them in an Algebra 1 class and letting them see some success, you can change outcomes all the way through. But here's the catch, and this is the way we really talk people into doing this, and it's important. So when our kids finished Algebra 1 in 8th grade, we had them take the TSI test, because really you just need Algebra 1. There are a couple beyond Algebra 1, so we put together a TSI prep course for them. They took the TSI test, so then they become college ready. So those of you outside Texas understand that's AccuPlacer. And in Texas, our accountability measures college readiness. How many students do you have that are college ready? Our students are college ready by 9th grade. Now, they measured in 12th grade, but the impact, by the time they get to 12th grade, they're all going to be college ready because we're having them take the TSI. We're getting them ready for those things. And so it's a short-term loss, but it's a long-term gain. Would you rather do really well in Algebra 1 in 9th grade, or would you rather have all these kids college ready in 12th grade?
Right.
So you have to say, I'm willing to take the hit. You have to communicate to the board. You have to communicate to the administrators. You have to talk to the teachers and say, this is what we're willing to do. It's a good question.
So along those same lines of accountability, one of the questions was, did the 7th grade students take the 8th grade STAR exam, or what exam did they take?
In some districts, they did. So, and I would tell you, some of you are outside Texas. So look at the test and determine which one would they be most successful with. So in some districts, they taught those 8th grade TEKS in 7th grade and said, we want them to take the 8th grade test. In Texas, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you'll know more about this than me, Paris, the 7th grade test is traditionally harder than the 8th grade test. So
there's a lot of thoughts behind that, right? Why do they score higher on 7th? They have some technology, the questions, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
So it's all about the test. If you want to look at those things and then decide what test they should take, but we have the option. So that's important to know. There's an option. Some states may not have that option. They may have to take the 7th grade test. if that's the truth, then prepare for that and make sure you use that boot camp time, those 3 weeks after testing, or 4 weeks, or how much time your district has, to catch them up and get them ready, and use the summer.
Okay. One of the questions, I'm going to try to answer this, but correct me if I'm wrong, Cathy, is about the certification. So your middle school teachers that needed to get certified, the question is there a certification just for Algebra 1? And from what I understand, you have to have a secondary certification to be able to teach Algebra 1. So it's all one test.
Yes. The test is very algebra-centered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you do well in that, you're going to probably do well. But my understanding, so I didn't teach the prep class, but if you have this prep class, you're going to get the things that you need to be able to be successful. And our math teachers can do it. I feel like our middle school math teachers have all the concepts they need to be able to learn the next concept, to be able to teach secondary and get that secondary certificate. And what a blessing for them to have another certificate.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I know I was so afraid to do it myself because I thought, oh, I won't be able to handle any of the pre-cal or calc on that test. But just like you're saying, all of that, once you start teaching it, you understand it and learn it at such a deeper level, and that prepares you for it. So I'm pretty sure it's the same for other states. You do have to have a secondary certification. There's not just a Algebra 1 certification. Another question that came in, can you talk a little bit about what steps were taken for the Summer Bridge course to ensure you got high levels of participation?
So it's kind of mixed. We had high level. In some districts we would have over 100 kids, and in some we didn't. And it's kind of, it's district specific on why the participation was what it was. But we targeted about 100 students per campus to be able to attend the Summer Bridge program. So not every kid went, but we picked those 100 kids that we thought would benefit the most from it. And it's talking with parents, and it's making sure it's fun. So the stuff, they loved it, by the way. The Agile Mind program is amazing. I highly recommend their Summer Bridge program. And then make sure you have other things too. So we did a lot of SEL, they did a lot of SEL pieces. They made it fun. So it's like a summer camp.
Okay, excellent. And this kind of piggybacks on it. So if you had a student that moved into the district that was on a traditional schedule and traditional pathway, where did you place them?
So they would take probably 8th grade. It depends. So I wasn't a part of that decision process. Depending on when they move in, they may come to Algebra 1, or they may go to an 8th grade section, which most of our districts ended up having an 8th grade math section just for those kids. And then they would take Algebra 1, and they may double up their sophomore year. So we wanted to make sure they still had those options when they got to junior and senior year, so they would likely take Algebra 2 and Geometry together.
Okay. So another question is, if somebody's interested in implementing this, what do you think those first steps or those next steps would be to get them started?
So first step would be buy-in from district administration and understanding the consequences that come with it, the accountability pieces. You got to get buy-in at the middle school and the high school, and planning for the personnel that it takes to do it. So getting teachers certified, making sure you have calculus teachers in the future, but offering it in a way that incentivizes it, so they get another certificate or they get a master's degree as they do those kinds of things. So that would kind of be the first steps. So as we did the think tank, we kind of came to these realizations, right? So the other is to get the kids ready. So look at your curriculum. By the way, we've already we have crosswalks on that website that I put, so you can see the missing standards if you're in Texas. If you're not in Texas, somebody somewhere has done this with the Common Core. I'm confident of that. So you can go in and see what the missing elements are just using a vertical alignment document. So go into a vertical alignment document in your curriculum and say, okay, this is what's missing. This is what we need to have in a boot camp in May, and this is what who we need to target. And you'll know after May who you need to target for summer. And like I said, I recommend Agile Mind. I recommend you work with TI. So you're going to need calculators. In Texas, if you want your kids to be successful in Algebra 1 and have a unique advantage, they need TI-Nspires. So you have to get your teachers to buy into TI-Nspires. And you may think, why would they need to buy in? They need to buy in to TI-Nspires. You need to help them understand why they are so important and train them. And so we did the conference with TI because we just had so many teachers. I mean, we had hundreds of teachers that needed to be trained, but you can do that in your district. Make sure you get them trained on those Nspires, and we use navigators too. So navigators are really important. So make sure they have the technology, make sure you have the buy-in, make sure you address the student needs, and take the help from partners where you can. If you have a Gear Up grant, this is all very doable because the money is there for these purposes. But you can now scale things with technology that you wouldn't be able to otherwise with things like Agile Mind. So I would recommend that.
That's very helpful. And I'll chat a little bit about Gear Up and the support and everything in just a second. I want to make sure that we get through everybody's questions because there's so many great ones coming in. This is from a CTE teacher, and they're wondering if students in 8th grade would benefit from financial algebra.
So I don't know the answer to that question, but I know this. The curriculums that were most successful in our districts were centered on real-world problems. Project-based learning, problem-based learning, and real-world scenarios. So they knew they had to do that to be successful. And so I would think any kind of financial curriculum is real-world, and our kids understand finances. So I cannot find a reason why that wouldn't be appropriate without looking at the curriculum itself.
Okay. This is a good follow-up to that. So if you have all students take Algebra 1 in 8th grade, would you recommend that they take Geometry or Algebra 2 next? So most traditional pathways have them take Geometry, but this person's district has them take Algebra 2 before that. What is your recommendation? Where are you seeing?
We have both.
Okay.
And they seem to be successful in both. You know, I really don't have an opinion one way or the other because we do have districts that do both. It's both of them have value to me. And some people think, well, if you do Algebra 2 as a continuation of Algebra 1, conceptually, those ideas are still carrying over. But if you know in Algebra 2, you need some geometry to be able to completely do well in that course. So it's kind of there's no right answer. It's up to your district. If you want to do Algebra 2 first, I would recommend doing some kind of summer program or boot camp to make sure you have those missing standards, especially if they skipped 8th grade math, to be able to go into Algebra 2.
Right. There's
8th grade is very geometry heavy, so if they miss that piece, it makes it tough.
Okay, that makes sense. So I'm going to switch gears here for a little bit. If I missed your question, will you please add it to the chat again one more time, and we're going to do one more Q&A at the end here. I'm just going to share a little bit about what it looks like as TI has supported these educational partnerships. So as Cathy mentioned, they implemented this initiative with their Gear Up grant. and you don't have to have one, of course, to do this. We help districts implement many plans across the nation, but it is a wonderful opportunity to make that happen, and I'm going to share about that in just a second. But what really helps us is first sitting down and looking, talking with the grant about what are your goals of this grant. So obviously we knew with UT Austin that their goals were an Algebra 1 for All initiative, right? That's something that they wanted to do. Now, for some of the other grants that we work with, maybe they have a STEM initiative. So maybe they're looking at making sure that all students are exposed to computer science or programming or things like that. But first, we just like to sit down and understand what are those goals of that grant. From there, it helps us determine what technology is going to be the most beneficial to implement to help meet those goals. So Cathy talked about their grant, and their teachers use TI-Nspire, and that is a graphing calculator. In case you're not aware, it is approved on Texas 8th grade STAR exam, Texas Algebra 1 end of course exam. It's approved on ACT, SAT, AP, IB exams, all high stakes exams that most states use for accountability purposes. So they use the TI-Nspire CX2, and they also use the Navigator System, which is made up of this little yellow hat. It's a wireless adapter that goes on top of the Nspire calculator, and it speaks wirelessly to a teacher's router plugged into a teacher's computer. Ruth, can you not see my slide? Let me know if you're not seeing it. I think y'all are seeing, oops, I'm not the presenter. Cathy, can you make me the presenter?
I could try.
Okay.
Let's see.
Okay, we're good now, I think, actually.
Okay.
You guys are seeing the slide with the technology on it, right? I believe. So this Navigator system allows students to talk to the teacher wirelessly. The teacher can send questions to do formative assessment, which is so important for a teacher to be able to identify, are these kids getting these concepts? But at the same time, a teacher can have all the students show their work, so they can show every single student's screen at one time. So maybe the teacher asks them to graph a line parallel to a line that they've shown, and they'll be able to see and interact and see as a whole, as a class, what is everybody understanding, and be able to show so many different representations and models, which is obviously such a huge part of algebra. But that formative assessment is huge. I taught with it, and I always say if I went back to the classroom, I'd take out a personal loan to get a Navigator system without, instead of teaching without it again, because you just didn't know what you didn't know. So middle school students are really good at kind of faking it and acting like they're knowing and understanding things, and they'll be like, yeah, I got it. And you think, I'm the best teacher in the world, they got it. But with Navigator, you're able to identify, oh, only 25% of the students really understood what I just taught. So that really helps identify those misconceptions and get to the heart of them right away. But let's say that we're working with a grant that has a STEM or coding initiative. For them, we might be integrating our TI Innovator Hub, which is a microcontroller that they can do coding on the graphing calculator, send it to this TI Innovator Hub to check to see, is their code working? Did they turn on the correct color light? Did they connect it to a servo motor to have it operate something correctly? And then we also have our TI Innovator Rover, which is our robotics vehicle. So all the students are getting to code on the graphing calculator, which is huge. They don't have to be a one-to-one district to be on a computer. They can take it outside into a hallway. They can go connect that TI Innovator Hub to a temperature sensor outside. It's very, very mobile, and there's no internet connection required to do any of this. So when obviously we've all kind of ran into these issues of bandwidth creating so many problems, during 2020, none of this has to be done with a Wi-Fi connection. Jerry, I see your question about, does Navigator work with a Chromebook? At this time, so Navigator works with a PC or Mac. on a teacher's computer, and then it connects to the handheld. So the graphing calculator is what the student is using to connect to the teacher, not the actual Chromebook. We do have student software for a PC or a Mac as well. So if your students wanted to interact with the software and an emulator of Nspire on their computer, they could do that, but it doesn't have a Navigator component to talk to the teacher. So like I said, we look at what are the goals of the grant, and then we look at what technology will help them to achieve these, implementing these goals. From there is where we customize and really look at what type of professional learning and individualized coaching is needed, again, to help accomplish these goals. So for Cathy, when working with Dr. Moak and UT Austin, for instance, because Algebra 1 is a huge initiative for them, some of the initial training we gave is first on just how do I familiarize myself with this graphing technology, with the Navigator system, how do I integrate it? But then what we did was we created a customized curriculum alignment. So using the TEKS resource system that they were using for some of their curriculum, we created a curriculum alignment for them where basically all the free TI-Nspire activities that we have created and aligned to TEKS, we had it ready to go for them. So when they knew they were in the curriculum and teaching this concept, they just click on a link and access that activity ready to go for the teacher to integrate and the student to investigate the math using that. So that is customized and individualized depending on the standards that you're using. In addition to that, we provided question documents that are ready to go to help assess and check for understanding and do formative and summative assessment using the technology. But then when we looked at what other training the teachers needed, for instance, for UT Gear Up, we provided, this year we're implementing and providing training for them on leveraging the TI-Nspire technology for success on the Algebra 1 and 8th grade end of course exams, because obviously success on that is such a huge goal for this grant. Some of the other grants that we work with, we might tailor their training in Ph.D. around learning to code on TI-Nspire technology or integrating the Rover and Innovator System, again, if they have a STEM goal or something like that as a part of the initiative for that grant. But we do whole teacher, like traditional, when we're face-to-face, hopefully again sometime soon, we do that as whole group out of the classroom. And then we also do virtual training as well that we've been doing all year, and it's been going very successfully. And then in addition to that, we do individualized coaching. So that might mean team teaching or modeling a lesson for a teacher or observing them and providing feedback. We've come up with some new different alternatives in this virtual environment to provide to teachers where we'll do office hours for them, or also we're doing boot camps for students where maybe they need help on leveraging the technology for ACT or SAT success or Algebra 1 or 8th grade end of course success. And so we can provide training to the students in that grant as well. So that's kind of what our partnerships have looked like. And a lot of these partnerships have taken place through Gear Up grants, like Cathy mentioned. So I believe she went through what the whole acronym meant. It's right there on the screen for you, gaining early awareness and readiness for undergraduate programs. If you're interested in applying or thinking about how you can do this, there's a new competition opening in early 2021. We expect to see that competition and that grant opening up the application window in the next coming weeks here. But there's a link to the federal government page that goes over what the grant is, who qualifies, all of the details of that grant, how to apply, everything. And remember, you'll be getting this presentation and all these links will be active for you afterwards. So we've partnered with Gear Up grants across the nation for the past 15 years. And like I said, we work with you to determine how many kids are you going to be supporting, what type of initiatives are you trying to accomplish, and how can we partner with you, what type of technology will help you successfully accomplish those goals. And we stay a partner with you. That's traditionally a 7-year grant, and we stay a partner throughout the entire time of that grant. Okay, so I am the ETC for part of Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico, but I have a wonderful team of colleagues across the nation. So in case you're joining us from another state and you're interested in applying for your Gear Up grant or starting some type of initiative like this and you want to meet with your ETC, those are my colleagues and the territories that they cover. And then, of course, when you get this email, you'll get a link to their email and contact information. Cathy, do you want to quickly mention some of the professional development opportunities that you have available on your site or coming up?
I would love to. Thanks, Parisa. So we do professional development. We actually had to change a lot of our approach because of the pandemic. And we have created several courses online. So anyone can go take our courses that we offer. We have differentiated instruction. We have behavior management. We have hybrid learning, which has been a big hit. And you can follow this link, utgearup.talentlms.com, and you can go take a course anywhere from 1 to 6 hours, and you'll get continuing education credit for those courses. And we would love to have you. This is a service we offer for our districts, and we would also love to offer it to you.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Cathy. One professional development opportunity coming up that we'd like you to know about is our T-Cubed International Conference. It is truly an international conference. We have educators from all over the world that we usually do in person that come to share their expertise on integrating technology. This year it will be virtual. It's taking place February 13th and 20th. February 13th is the pre-conference day, but a registration is open right now. And this is a wonderful opportunity for you or your teachers to learn more about integrating technology to support math, science, and STEM instruction. Oops, sorry, I missed the 27th also. Thank you, Ruth. On February 13th, we are going to have another TI Talk, which is going to be with Dr. Fletcher about We Teach CS, and you can too. So you have to actually be registered for the T-Cube conference to have access to this talk on February 13th. That's one of the only ones that you have to have a separate registration for. And we are happy to extend to you registration as your ETC. If you reach out to us, we will give you a registration code. That way you could participate in that TI talk on February 13th if you would like to. After that, on March 4th, we will have another TI talk, Begin with the End in Mind. And this is going to be just kind of another follow-up in this series of TI talks that we're doing to share different partnerships and initiatives that we've been working with across the nation, so they can share the success that they've had and hopefully empower and inspire y'all to do something similar in your districts. And then, of course, we always have Tuesday webinars. These are free for your educators, for you. They're all archived, but we also do them on demand and live, and those take place on Tuesday, and you'll be able to register for those at that link as well. So I'm going to click back over and see if there were any follow-up questions that came in. And yes, just so that I make sure I explain that correctly. If you reach out to us to get the registration code for T-Cubed conference, you'll get registration for the TI talk on February 13th and to all the sessions for the T-Cubed conference. So I'm going to just check back here to see if there were any other questions that I missed. We were able to put the Bootstrap link in the chat window for the person that asked about it earlier.
I think I got all of my links fixed that were either locked or went into the Netherland. I don't know.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. If anybody has any other questions for Cathy or for me that you'd like us to address before this TI Talk finishes, please feel free to put them in the chat window. We appreciate you all spending time with us here today, and hopefully you have learned some new and exciting things that you could be doing with your students. Hopefully Cathy has empowered you to go out and do this year, in this crazy, crazy year, but to make it happen for your students. You will also, when you finish this, when we log out of this call today, you're going to get a survey reminder. If you don't mind filling that out, we'd really appreciate it. I did have another question come in. So is there available match through TI for Gear Up? Yes, absolutely there is. As a partner with the Gear Up grant, TI matches 100% with any of the grants that we partner with.
It's usually even better than that. So I'll guarantee you, but they have been a great match partner for us.
We try to do that. And just another friendly reminder, you can save the chat with links as you leave the so everything you'll be meeting. So I don't see any other new questions coming in, Cathy. We would like to thank you for making time to share with us today, and thank everybody again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
What about Trio Talent Search Partnerships? Kimberly, if it's okay, we'll reach out to you offline about those Trio Talent Search Partnerships. Oh, I know that's another partnership or another grant in another state that I've heard about, but we will reach out to you offline, Kimberly, if that's okay. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.